Welcome once again to Hometown Movies. My name is Michael Kelly, and our guests tonight are two filmmakers from the Genesee County area, Chris Barkey and Sam Morris, who together form As We Like It Productions. Chris, what got you into this business?
Well, basically, I ended up in an automobile accident a few years ago, and I decided that it was time I went back to college after that. And when I did, I went straight for broadcast. You know, I had a friend that was also involved in the radio aspect through another school in Detroit, and it was a trade tech, and I thought at the time it'd be better I got into a degree instead of just going for an 8-month course and pursuing it from that angle.
So did you wind up getting a degree in communication?
I'm still presently working on the associates, but I've got all my broadcasting classes out of the way, so what I've got left to do is the regular requirements that normally have to be done.
Okay. Sam, what about you? Have you done work in broadcasting before?
A little bit. I started out with a theatrical background in high school, and sometime after that I produced a couple of plays on my own. And I had worked in sales for 8 or 9 years, for what reason I don't know, and I finally decided that it was time to answer what I really wanted to do for a living, which I decided was television, video production, that sort of thing. And so like Chris, I turned around and went back to school and got involved with more and more things, and it snowballed from that point.
Now, you've been working together on a very special production that we want to talk about tonight. Since we are approaching the Halloween season and we're in the fall, which is always a wonderful visual season. I mean, you know, fall has some of the best images of the year. But the two of you have been collaborating on a very special seasonal production. What is it called?
It's called Haunting Genesee, and it's people's relating their true ghost stories, things that they feel actually happened. We interviewed a woman in Grand Blanc who had multiple spirits residing in her home, and then we also took the last portion of the show and devoted it to the hauntings at the Fenton Hotel in Fenton, which has been reportedly haunted for years, and we're showing parts of the building that people have not seen before, and they're hearing about things they may not have heard about before.
Chris, how did you get in touch with these people?
Well, basically, when we started this out, Sam and I got together with one of our publicity people for the program, and we put an ad through the paper. And we didn't receive a lot of responses, but we received quite a number of them to start with. And basically, we went through that through telephone numbers and addresses, and contacted a few people, and then we came down to the 2 stories that we felt were the most important at the time, as well as excuse me, we did some of our own research as well, from relating with other people that had heard stories about this or stories about that. In fact, there was one realty company that evidently had a few houses that were set up, but unfortunately we didn't get to them at this program. Hopefully some later date we will be, and that just came from word of mouth from friends.
You would think a realtor wouldn't particularly want to advertise the fact that they had a haunted house. You know?
Exactly.
And you know, it's funny because there's a lot of people when that ad first came out, like Chris mentioned, we didn't get a lot of responses. I think people either weren't aware of what it was we were trying to do, or possibly they didn't want to come forward and tell their stories. Since we've been working on this, once the decision was made of the 2 stories that we were going to focus on, now we have people coming to us and asking if they can be included into it, because now they have a story to tell. And I've come across a couple very interesting ones that hopefully someday we can get to and do a show about.
Well, I would think that if somebody believes they have a spirit in their house, that they would be rather reluctant to tell people that, you know, the initial reaction by most people is going to be, okay, I know what spirits you got in your house.
Yeah, exactly.
They come in bottles.
Right, right.
But if the sense is that you are sincere and that you actually want to communicate the story, I'll ask you later whether or not you believe. That's a separate issue. But if you wish to sincerely communicate these stories, I would think then it's sort of like once people begin to realize you're not out to make them look stupid on television.
That was one of our major concerns when we were doing this. We were not trying to present the issue in a strictly serious format, but by the same token, we weren't out to make a fool of anybody. Our major purpose in all of this is try to present an unbiased opinion, which in all essence is a news reporter's major goal is to do, is present unbiased in whatever they do. But from your point of perspective, you're going to have a biased opinion no matter what happens, because of you're looking through the camera at that moment and trying to present that particular issue that you see in front of you. And in this instance, Sam basically produced one portion of the program. I produced another, so we've got even a difference of opinion involved in the two stories, as well as their own aspects of the people that we interviewed.
Do you see yourselves in this project as documentary filmmakers?
That's kind of hard to say, because when Chris and I were initially talking about doing this show, do we want to attempt to do this? We thought, well, do we go at it as an investigative standpoint, a completely documentary standpoint, or strictly, what my goal was, to simply have fun for Halloween? And we thought, well, you can't do a lot of any one of those three, and hopefully we don't. Like Chris said, we didn't do the portions to disprove what the people were saying. We didn't go out of the way to prove what they were saying. At the same time, we didn't present it in serious enough of a vein to really make it very heavy and gosh, folks, pay attention. But we're not so light as that we're making little of it. So out of all that, we come up with a fun program that when you watch it, you might stop and say, well, maybe. Okay.
Exactly. You know, the way you describe what you're trying to do is actually the most difficult way to deal with a creative project, because it is much easier to assume a posture. To say, I'm going to simply be a fly on the wall, or I'm really going to bring these people, you know, down. You know, just like Michael Moore did with his film. Michael made a very funny film, but it was a lot easier to make that kind of film than it was to make an objective sort of documentary.
Yes, and we didn't have the funding of bingo games behind us.
That's right.
It was a little bit tougher that way.
Everything we did, you know, was done out of our pocket, and so it makes it hard. And you know, when we're talking about the vein that we did it in, I've done Christmas specials here for Channel 17 before, and I've gone with the I'm going to present the facts kind of a thing. And in all honesty, it's a little dull to do. They're a fun program to watch, but they're dull to make. And we had a ball making this one.
Exactly.
A lot of work, a lot of aggravation. Chris and I are good friends, but there were times when the weapons were about to come out.
Exactly.
At the end of all of it, we had fun, and I think we made a fun program that people are going to enjoy.
Where did you get the equipment? How did you get this done?
Well, everything was produced with cooperation here with Public Access Channel 17. With my already having been a producer here on a volunteer basis, I had access to it. As far as crew, it was primarily Chris and I. We both have experience with television and television equipment from other sources, other places that we've been. And with the two of us, it's a lot easier to coordinate a schedule than trying to get a 6 or 7 person crew together.
And then basically the balance of that was friends that helped out. And in fact, my daughter even helped out carrying a few things here and there. So we gave her a little title up there at the end of it. So, you know, it was a fun project all the way through. The equipment, you start talking about the amount of equipment and then the amount of time on editing systems, and that's where our conflict came in with scheduling sometimes. I worked with the gentleman here at Public Access before at Water Street Pavilion when I worked down there in the audio-video end of it. Steve Hester. Right. Okay. And I'd known him prior to this, and then Sam knew him from coming in here. And in between the mix of it, we both met over at Channel 28 when we were working over there together. So working together through a few nights here and there, we came up with so many different ideas, some that were just off the top of our head, some that were off the wall, and then some that we were seriously considering, and this happened to be one of them. We started thinking, what, April? Would you say?
Well, we probably even started talking about sooner than that. April's about the time we made the decision that, okay, we're going to do this. And yeah, like Chris said, we came up with so many ideas during that time working sign-off shifts together. That, you know, it was about April that we finally said, let's do it. Let's not talk about it, let's just do it.
Which just indicates the amount of time it takes to actually put something together.
Well, when you made the decision we're going to do it, did you decide a Halloween special? Was that the goal?
I knew that I wanted to do something for Halloween. Halloween is my favorite holiday of the year, bar none.
Same here.
And I never have enough fun on Halloween, not like I feel I should have. And so I wanted to do something special for Halloween, and then it was, well, what do I do? And I kept thinking of a lot of different things, but one of the things that would hold me back, again, when you're working with funding out of your own pocket and the availability of materials, my dreams were bigger than what I could actually make happen. And again, we talked through Chris, we started talking about, somehow one night we got to talk about people's real ghost stories.
Right.
And are there really
Right.
ghosts? Not necessarily thinking in the context of a show. And it just kind of dawned on us that, you know, it'd be fun to have people talk about this stuff on camera.
And that's a hard thing to do, is get people willing, as we were mentioning before, about are they afraid that, you know, somebody's going to look down on them or whatever and say, oh yeah, right, I understand. Yeah, it's the wind blowing through the house, it's the house settling, it's the water pipes banging, that kind of thing. And a lot of people have a hard time even relating that in a casual conversation, let alone to somebody that they hardly even know. So to put them on camera, I've got to commend these people quite a bit, because whether they believe or they don't believe isn't really the point. The point is, this is their perspective of what happened to them, and they're willing to share it with everyone else.
What was interesting in the bits I saw of your program, that the descriptions of the ghost stories were not, you know, bizarre. There were no headless corpses floating around, that sort of thing. I mean, they were the sort of odd little things that were simply inexplicable.
That's right.
It wasn't that anything.
That's right.
Nobody wrote, you know, a death to all in blood on the wallpaper, but there were these things that kept happening. They were just
little things
odd
that, like you're saying, anybody could do, but the circumstances surrounding them were nobody did it. And it was not a thing where one person was suspecting another person in the house or suspecting an employee, saying, well, you must have done this, because they knew that just plain didn't happen. And things, the hotel had a lot of things that were, that you could get several people together and do it, but when it occurred, there was no way possible for that to be done. And that's the kind of part that when you watch it, you can watch it and you might hear a creak somewhere else in the house, and you're thinking, you know,
what might this be? You know?
It's the house settling. It's the house settling. Don't worry, it's the house settling.
That settles it. Right?
Yeah, that's
for
right.
sure.
And I'm not going up to look.
That's right. I don't need to go look. It's a house settling.
Did you find, Chris, that your viewpoint changed?
Honestly, I can't say it changed an awful lot, for the simple fact that being Christian, as we might say, I believe in God can do just about anything. So why can't he present an afterlife person that maybe hasn't transcended to one place or another? I'm not saying it is true. I'm not saying it isn't. I think it can be possible, as a lot of people tend to think. Anything is possible.
You know, it's funny because in most cultures, there is sort of the general acceptance of the religion of the culture. In our country, it's Christianity. In India, it would be Hinduism. In other countries, other things. And yet very few people really look at the implications of that, you know. And if you look at Christianity in the sense of, you know, hierarchies of angels and hierarchies of demons and all the forces that if one is a Christian, one would accept, then that pretty much opens the door to an awful lot of stuff.
You know, I mean, if a long time ago in grade school, in fact, I learned about the yin and yang theory of two sides, duality kind of thing. And it really stuck in my head, because if you believe in the good, then there must be the evil to combat the good, so you must believe in both sides, or what's the sense in believing in either one? And under those circumstances, yes, there's a possibility. Now, I'm not saying these ghosts or apparitions are evil or good. I'm just saying the fact that it's possible that they could be there. It takes me back to an old Costello and Abbott and Costello movies that where he was supposedly a ghost after he fell down in this wishing well. And I looked at that back when I was a kid thinking, well, I suppose that is possible.
Well, you know, we look at things in a combative term of good and evil and the struggle between the forces of good and evil. But if, in fact, there are good spirits and bad spirits, that doesn't necessarily mean there aren't just some spirits.
Exactly.
I mean, some guys that fell through the crack.
Yeah, that's right.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
Yeah, and even if you think in terms of, if we all have that soul or spirit that will live on somewhere else, you're implying a passage, a travel way. And all of us at one time or another have been going somewhere and have gotten stuck. whatever, and there's no reason why it couldn't happen then. So I guess it's one of those things that it's probably impossible to prove and it's impossible to disprove.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. We like to think of if there is another world that it is very clear cut. You know, that everything's very simple. You know, good people go to heaven and never have trouble again. Bad people go to hell. Nothing good ever happens to them again.
A lot of gray area.
It might be a lot more. I mean, you know, it's sort of like the film Beetlejuice.
Sure.
Where, you know, you find yourself waiting in line.
Yeah,
exactly. Bureaucrat, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, most definitely.
What did you find, Sam, when you did the interviews?
My views probably didn't change too much because originally I had felt pretty much like Chris did. I didn't necessarily believe wholeheartedly, nor did I disbelieve. I simply felt that anything was possible. What we did find through some of the research is that how much correlation there is when you talk to people who have investigated this, be they psychic researchers, psychologists, whoever, they will all talk about spirits having to move on to a higher plane or another dimension, and that they can be held back for whatever reason. And there is as much coincidence there as there is when you hear about people talk about afterlife experience. Dying on an operating table, they see the light. They all describe the same thing, and a lot of the psychic researchers describe the same thing from what they have felt through seances or research. And so I think there's grounds to say, okay, it might be there. I don't feel there's grounds to say, yes, this is fact. Plain truth is we just don't know if it's fact or not. But I don't think there's anything to be afraid of or be hesitant about. I just think it's something to say, well, it could very well happen, and this show gives some folks who are saying, well, this is what happened to us.
You know, on that same lines, What to a point here where you've got the movie Ghost, you've got the movie out right now, what was the name of that? Afterlife, where the students try to kill themselves for a little while.
Flatliners.
Flatliners, right? You know, and a couple of the talk shows recently have brought that point to light, where people that have had near-death experiences, lifted off the table, kind of thing, saw a nurse or a doctor outside of their room talking about a certain thing at the time that they were supposedly clinically dead. And then, of course, they come back to life and can relate all this back to them. Well, if there isn't a form of lightness, communication, the searing light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing, how would these people even come close to knowing this unless somebody was screaming outside a hallway? So it tends to point out the fact in just the last few months that even though we talked about this last Christmas, all this has been coming on up to this date, and we must not be the only ones thinking in that avenue. Okay, well, we're going to take a couple minutes to interrupt for our message. When we come back, we'll see if we can pry Carl Sagan's great close-up shot out of his film and see if he'll come back and tell us what's wrong with this conversation. Anyways, we'll be back in just a minute.